What happens when America's sweetheart meets late-night television's most unpredictable host? You won't believe what unfolds when Sandra Bullock sits down with Stephen Colbert for what was supposed to be a lighthearted promotional appearance. That spiraled into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night history. The cameras captured every uncomfortable moment as a beloved Hollywood icon found herself under attack from a host who seemed determined to provoke a reaction at any cost. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds when two entertainment titans clash in the most unexpected way possible. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert's studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy last night. But there was an undercurrent of tension that production staff later described as electric. Sandra Bullock, radiant in a navy blue blazer and looking every bit the seasoned professional, settled into the guest chair with the confidence of someone who had navigated countless talk show appearances throughout her decades-long career. The audience erupted in warm applause, clearly thrilled to see one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses. Colbert, wearing his signature suit and tie, flashed that familiar grin that had charmed audiences for years. But those who knew him well might have noticed something different in his demeanor, a sharpness in his eyes, a certain restlessness that suggested he had more than standard promotional questions on his mind. The show's producers had briefed him extensively about Bullock's latest project, a feel-good drama about second chances, but it seemed Colbert had his own agenda brewing. "Sandra Bullock, everybody," Colbert announced as the applause died down. "Thank you so much for being here. You look absolutely stunning, as always." His tone was warm, but there was something calculated about the compliment, as if he were setting up for something bigger. Bullock smiled graciously, clearly comfortable in the familiar territory of celebrity pleasantries. "Thank you for having me, Stephen. It's always a pleasure to be here," she replied, her voice carrying that distinctive warmth that had endeared her to millions of fans worldwide. She crossed her legs and leaned back slightly, the picture of relaxed confidence. The first few minutes proceeded exactly as expected. Colbert asked about her new film, and Bullock delivered polished, engaging answers about working with the cast and the importance of storytelling that resonates with audiences. She was in full promotional mode, hitting all the right notes with practiced ease. The audience hung on her every word, laughing at her self-deprecating humor and charming anecdotes about life on set. But then something shifted. Colbert's questions began to take on a different tone, becoming more pointed and personal. "You know, Sandra, I've been thinking about your career trajectory," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "You've been in Hollywood for what, 3 decades? Now, that's a long time to maintain relevance in such a youth-obsessed industry." Bullock's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Well, I think good storytelling is timeless, Stephen. Age is just a number when you're passionate about what you do." Her response was diplomatic, but there was a subtle defensiveness creeping into her voice. Of course," Colbert nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't satisfied with that answer. "But let's be honest here, Hollywood has not been kind to aging actresses. I mean, we've all seen the headlines about the lack of substantial roles for women over 40. How do you reconcile continuing to take leading roles that might otherwise go to younger actresses who are just starting their careers?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Bullock's posture straightened slightly, and her media-trained smile became more forced. "I think that's a rather reductive way to look at it, Stephen. The industry has room for stories featuring women of all ages. It's not a zero-sum game, isn't it, though?" Colbert pressed, leaning forward with renewed intensity. "When studios have limited budgets for female-led projects, every role you take is potentially one less opportunity for an emerging actress. Some critics have suggested that established stars like yourself have a responsibility to step back and make room for fresh voices." The audience began to sense the shift in tone. The comfortable laughter that had punctuated the earlier conversation gave way to an uncomfortable silence. Bullock's publicist, visible in the wings, looked visibly concerned as she watched her client navigate increasingly hostile territory. "I find that perspective quite troubling, actually," Bullock responded, her voice growing cooler. "The solution to ageism in Hollywood isn't for experienced actresses to simply disappear. It's to create more opportunities for everyone. I've spent my career working with talented people of all ages, and I've never seen my success as coming at someone else's expense." Colbert's grin widened, but there was no warmth in it now. "That's a very diplomatic answer, Sandra, but let's talk specifics. Your latest film features you as a love interest to an actor who's 15 years younger than you. Don't you think that perpetuates unrealistic expectations about aging and relationships?" The question was clearly designed to provoke, and Bullock's carefully maintained composure began to crack. "I think you're mischaracterizing both the film and my role in it," she said, her voice sharpening. "The story isn't about age, it's about human connection and finding love at any stage of life. I'm surprised you'd reduce it to something so superficial." "Oh, I'm not reducing anything," Colbert replied, his tone becoming more aggressive. "I'm just pointing out what audiences can clearly see. Hollywood has always had a double standard when it comes to aging, and frankly, some of us expected more from someone with your influence and platform." The confrontation was escalating rapidly, and Bullock's media training was clearly being pushed to its limits. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair slightly tighter, and her smile had completely disappeared. "Stephen, I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish here, but I came on your show to talk about a film that I'm proud of, not to be lectured about industry politics." "Industry politics?" Colbert's voice rose slightly. "Sandra, this isn't politics. This is about responsibility. You have a platform, you have influence, and some would argue you have an obligation to use it more thoughtfully. Instead, you continue to take roles that younger actresses desperately need while positioning yourself as some kind of Hollywood survivor story." The audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Bullock's face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "I think you're completely out of line," she said, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed emotion. "I've worked hard for everything I've achieved, and I won't apologize for continuing to pursue projects that challenge and inspire me." But Colbert wasn't finished. His next words would push the confrontation to a point of no return, setting the stage for what would become one of the most talked-about moments in late-night television history. "You know what, Sandra? Let's talk about something else entirely," Colbert said, his voice taking on a mock conversational tone that barely concealed his growing aggression. "I've been reading some interesting pieces about your personal life lately, specifically about your adoption journey and how you've spoken publicly about it." The shift in topic was jarring, and Bullock's eyes immediately narrowed with suspicion. "I'm sorry, what does that have to do with anything we've been discussing?" she asked, her voice sharp with defensive anger. The audience could sense they were about to witness something deeply uncomfortable, and a few nervous coughs echoed through the studio. Colbert leaned back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone who had just played a winning card. "Well, it's just fascinating how celebrities use their personal struggles as promotional tools. Your adoption story has been featured in countless interviews and magazine profiles. Some media critics have suggested it's become part of your brand strategy." The accusation hit Bullock like a physical blow. Her face went pale, then flushed bright red as the implications of what Colbert was suggesting sank in. "Are you seriously suggesting that I exploit my children for publicity?" she asked, her voice barely controlled. "That I use my family as some kind of marketing gimmick?" "I'm just asking questions that I think the public deserves to have answered," Colbert replied, with false innocence. When a celebrity repeatedly brings up personal details about their family life in interviews, it's fair to examine the motivations behind those choices, especially when those stories consistently paint you in such a sympathetic light. Bullock's hands were visibly shaking now, and she gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Stephen, I have never, ever used my children as promotional tools. When I've spoken about adoption, it's been to help other families going through similar experiences. To suggest otherwise is not just wrong, it's disgusting." But Colbert pressed on, seemingly energized by her obvious distress. "Come on, Sandra. You're a savvy businesswoman. You understand how public perception works. The timing of these personal revelations always seems to coincide with your film releases. That's not a coincidence. That's strategic." "That's enough," Bullock said, her voice rising dangerously. "I will not sit here and let you attack my integrity as a mother. Whatever point you think you're making, you've crossed a line that no decent person would cross." The studio audience was frozen in horrified silence. This had moved far beyond uncomfortable television into something that felt genuinely cruel. Production assistants in the wings were frantically trying to get Colbert's attention, making cutting gestures across their throats, but he seemed completely oblivious to their signals. "I'm not attacking anyone," Colbert said, his tone becoming more condescending. "I'm simply pointing out patterns that media observers have noticed. The fact that you're getting so defensive suggests that maybe there's some truth to what I'm saying." Bullock stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Defensive? You're damn right I'm defensive when someone questions my love for my children and suggests I exploit them for career gain. What kind of person does that make you, Stephen?" "The kind of person who asks hard questions," Colbert shot back, also rising from his chair. "The kind of journalist who doesn't just accept carefully crafted PR narratives. Maybe that's what's really bothering you. Someone finally calling out the calculated nature of your public persona." "Calculated?" Bullock's voice was now trembling with rage. "You want to see calculated? Let me tell you what's calculated. A talk show host who builds his reputation on being funny and likable, then ambushes guests with personal attacks because he thinks it'll get him viral moments and social media buzz." The confrontation had escalated to the point where both celebrities were standing, facing each other across the small coffee table that separated their chairs. The audience watched in stunned silence as two entertainment professionals abandoned all pretense of civility. "At least I'm honest about what I do," Colbert replied, his voice growing louder. "I don't hide behind a carefully constructed image of America's sweetheart while manipulating public sympathy for career advantage. You've built your entire brand on being relatable and down-to-earth, but it's all performance, isn't it? You don't know anything about me." Bullock fired back, her composure completely shattered. "You don't know what it's like to be a single mother trying to protect her children from exactly this kind of scrutiny. You don't know what it's like to open your heart to the world about something deeply personal, only to have cynical people like you twist it into something ugly." Colbert's expression shifted slightly, and for a moment, it seemed like he might pull back from the precipice. But instead, he doubled down with what would prove to be his most damaging comment yet. "Save the victim act, Sandra. You're one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood. You have more resources and privilege than 99% of the population. The idea that you're just a struggling single mom trying to protect her family is as manufactured as everything else about your public image." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Bullock's face went through a series of emotions: hurt, anger, disbelief, and finally, cold fury. When she spoke again, her voice was deadly quiet. "You are a disgusting human being," she said, each word carefully enunciated. "I have spent my entire career trying to be honest with audiences, to share my experiences in ways that might help other people. And you've taken that vulnerability and twisted it into something sick and calculated." "Oh, please," Colbert scoffed, seemingly oblivious to how badly he had misjudged the situation. "The vulnerability is part of the act. It's all part of the Sandra Bullock brand experience. Relatable millionaire, accessible movie star, the celebrity who's just like us. Except she's not, is she?" The production team was in full panic mode. Now, the show's executive producer was frantically trying to signal for a commercial break, but Colbert was completely absorbed in the confrontation. The audience sat in horrified fascination, witnessing the complete breakdown of what should have been a simple promotional appearance. "You know what the real tragedy is here," Bullock said, her voice gaining strength as her anger crystallized into something focused and devastating. "I actually respected you once. I thought you were intelligent, thoughtful, someone who used humor to illuminate important issues. Instead, you're just another bully with a platform, someone who tears down others to make himself feel important." Colbert's face darkened at the accusation. "A bully? I'm holding you accountable for your choices. That's what real journalists do. They ask the questions that others are afraid to ask. Maybe you're just not used to dealing with someone who won't play along with your carefully orchestrated media strategy." "Accountability?" Bullock laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call attacking a woman's relationship with her children? Is that what you call questioning someone's motives for sharing personal struggles? You're not a journalist, Stephen. You're a shock jock masquerading as an intellectual." The insult hit its mark, and Colbert's carefully maintained composure finally cracked completely. His next words would seal the fate of what had already become a public relations disaster. You know what, Sandra? Maybe the problem isn't that I'm asking hard questions. Maybe the problem is that you can't handle the truth about who you really are, Colbert said, his voice dripping with contempt. You've spent so long playing the perfect movie star, the perfect mother, the perfect humanitarian, that you've forgotten what it's like to be genuine. Everything about you is performance. The accusation was the final straw. Bullock's face transformed into something that audience members would later describe as pure rage mixed with heartbreak. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper, but carried the force of a hurricane. "How dare you?" she said, taking a step closer to him. "How dare you sit there and question my authenticity when you've spent this entire interview trying to tear me down for your own sick entertainment? You want to know what's performance? This is performance, you pretending to be some kind of moral authority while you attack a guest on your own show." Colbert, perhaps realizing too late that he had pushed things too far, attempted to regain some control. "Sandra, I think you're overreacting. This is what happens in real interviews. People get challenged. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing press tours." Overreacting. Bullock's voice cracked with emotion. "You've questioned my integrity, my motives as a mother, my entire career, and now you're telling me I'm overreacting? What is wrong with you? What happened to the man who used to fight for justice and truth? Because the person standing in front of me now is just cruel." The studio audience was completely silent, some people covering their mouths in shock, others looking away as if they were witnessing something too private and painful to watch. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every excruciating moment of the confrontation that had spiraled completely out of control. "I am fighting for truth," Colbert insisted, but his voice lacked conviction now. "The truth is that celebrity culture has become so sanitized, so fake, that nobody asks real questions anymore. Somebody has to be willing to cut through the PR nonsense." By destroying people? Bullock shot back. "By making them feel humiliated and small. That's not truth-telling, Stephen. That's sadism. You've taken whatever legitimate concerns you might have had about celebrity culture and weaponized them against someone who came here in good faith." Colbert's face was flushed now, and sweat was visible on his forehead. "Good faith? You came here to sell a movie, just like every other celebrity who sits in that chair. Don't pretend this was some noble mission." "Yes, I came here to promote my work," Bullock said, her voice growing stronger and more controlled as she channeled her anger into clarity. "But I also came here because I thought I was going to have a conversation with someone I respected. Instead, I walked into an ambush by someone who seems to think that being cruel is the same thing as being intelligent." The production team was making increasingly frantic gestures, but both celebrities were completely absorbed in their confrontation. The executive producer was practically jumping up and down in the wings, trying to get someone's attention to end the segment. "You want to know what's really sad about this?" Bullock continued, her voice taking on a tone of genuine sorrow beneath the anger. "I used to watch your show. I used to admire how you could be funny and insightful without being mean-spirited. My kids and I would watch clips of you online. How do I explain to them that someone they thought was one of the good guys turned out to be just another bully?" The mention of her children in this context seemed to hit Colbert like a physical blow. For the first time since the interview began, he looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. "Sandra, I never meant for this to get so personal." "Too late," she said firmly. "You made it personal the moment you questioned my relationship with my children. You made it personal when you suggested I exploit them for publicity. You made it personal when you decided that humiliating me would make good television." Colbert opened his mouth to respond, but Bullock held up her hand to stop him. "No, I'm done listening to you. I'm done being your punching bag. I'm done pretending that this is acceptable behavior from someone who claims to stand for decency and justice." She turned toward the audience, her voice carrying across the silent studio. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this. This isn't what I wanted when I came here tonight. I wanted to talk about a film I'm proud of, about stories that matter. Instead, I've been subjected to a character assassination by someone who seems to think that tearing people down is entertainment." The audience remained frozen, unsure whether to applaud or remain silent. Some people looked genuinely upset by what they had witnessed. Others seemed angry at Colbert for his behavior. The atmosphere in the studio was unlike anything anyone present had ever experienced. Bullock walked over to where her purse was sitting near the guest chair and picked it up with deliberate calm. You know what the real tragedy is here, Stephen? You had a platform that could have been used for good. You could have asked thoughtful questions about the industry, about the challenges women face, about the importance of representation. Instead, you chose to use your power to be petty and cruel. Sandra, please, Colbert said, his voice now carrying a note of desperation. Maybe we can start over. Maybe we can start over? Bullock turned back to face him, her expression incredulous. After what you've just put me through, after questioning my integrity as a mother and suggesting that my love for my children is a publicity stunt, there is no starting over from that. Stephen, some things can't be unsaid. She slung her purse over her shoulder and looked directly into the camera. To anyone watching this at home, I want you to know that what you've witnessed tonight is not normal. It's not acceptable. And it's not what journalism or entertainment should look like. We can do better than this. Colbert stood helplessly as Bullock walked toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly on the studio floor in the oppressive silence. The cameras followed her movement, capturing every step of what was clearly a definitive exit. Just before she reached the edge of the set, Bullock turned back one final time. You know what, Stephen? I actually feel sorry for you. Because someone who finds joy in humiliating others is someone who clearly isn't happy with themselves. I hope you figure out what's really bothering you, because it's clearly not me. With that devastating final observation, Sandra Bullock walked off the set of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, leaving behind one of the most shocking and uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. The audience sat in stunned silence as Colbert remained standing alone on the set, his face a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and what might have been regret. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing Colbert's obvious distress and the audience's uncomfortable silence, before someone finally had the presence of mind to cut to commercial. But the damage was done. In the space of a single interview, a respected talk show host had destroyed his reputation and humiliated one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses, creating a moment that would be dissected and analyzed for years to come. The confrontation between Sandra Bullock and Stephen Colbert had ended not with reconciliation or understanding, but with a complete breakdown of professional courtesy and human decency, leaving everyone involved to face the consequences of what had unfolded in front of a live studio audience and millions of viewers at home.